Effective immediately, Dr. Isaiah Booker will no longer serve as Chief Clinical Systems Officer.
At 9:20, my wife fired me from the company we had built together.
Clear every name on the red list, now.
All 7, or only the data team?
All 7. Continuity first.
By 10:17, 7 people had lost access.
My wife divorced me at 9 o'clock, fired me at 9:20, and at 9:21 I told my assistant, clear every name on the red list. Now. By 10:17, 7 people had lost access to our clinical systems. Not one therapist had missed an appointment. Not one patient had been turned away. And the $72 million sale my wife had built her future around had begun to come apart. Celeste was standing beneath the Harbor Bridge logo when the alert reached her phone. She had chosen the conference room in our Riverside headquarters. Glass walls, white table. Nearly 200 employees were watching the live stream from 8 recovery centers. She told them our marriage had ended with dignity. Then, she told them my role had ended with it. Effective immediately, she said, Dr. Isaiah Booker would no longer serve as Chief Clinical Systems Officer. Harbor Bridge was entering a new chapter under leadership prepared for growth, stability, and transition. She did not mention that I had founded the first clinic with her 28 years earlier. She did not mention that the medical corporation responsible for every clinical decision still belonged to me. And she did not mention that 7 people inside Harbor Bridge had spent months changing how patient safety problems appeared on reports prepared for the buyer. That was why Marian Ellis had a red binder open before Celeste finished speaking. Marian had worked beside me for 20 years. She was my assistant, our privacy administrator, and the custodian of records. She did not gasp when I called. She did not ask whether I was angry. She asked one question. All 7 or only the data team? All 7, I said. Continuity first. Understood. Within minutes, access began closing in a sequence we had tested twice. 3 administrative leaders, 2 integration managers, 1 compliance officer, and Dr. Ross Klein, the man Celeste planned to place in charge after I was gone. Their email still worked. Their building badges still worked. But none of them could open a patient chart, approve a staffing change, alter an audit trail, or begin the data transfer scheduled for that morning. At 10:17, Marian sent me a message. The final account is closed. All clinics operating. No appointments canceled. I read it from the back seat beside Dana in silence while Celeste called twice, then 6 times, then 11. I did not answer. Instead, I told my attorney, Dana Morales, to file the complaint we had prepared. Ask the court to preserve the records, I said. Stop the transfer. Protect the patients. Do not ask for my job back. Dana looked at me. Most men in your position would want the chair, she said. I had spent 3 decades learning that a chair can make a person look powerful while the floor beneath it is giving way. I did not need her chair. I needed 9 days, an audit trail, and 1 judge willing to read past the headline she had written for me. By noon, Celeste was telling reporters I had sabotaged the company because I could not accept the divorce. Maybe you would have believed her. Would you have called what I did revenge or responsibility? Hold your answer until you see the 7 names. 28 years before my wife called me obsolete, Harbor Bridge began with my father learning how to lift a spoon. His stroke came on a Sunday morning while he was buttoning his church shirt. By Monday evening, he could not move his right arm or form a complete sentence. The hospital stabilized him in 4 days. What came after was harder. The nearest rehabilitation program with a physician, physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech therapy under one roof was more than an hour from our home. My mother did not drive on freeways. I was a young doctor working long shifts. Celeste was building financial models for a hospital system. For 3 months, one of us drove my father east before sunrise, waded through treatment, and brought him home after dark. He recovered enough to hold a fork, walk with a cane, and tell the same joke until everyone at the table groaned. But I never forgot what distance had cost him. Recovery depended on skill, patience, and whether a family could afford to lose half a day getting to an appointment. Celeste saw the business problem before I did. People should not have to cross 2 counties to learn how to speak again, she said. We opened the first Harbor Bridge Center in a bank building that had been empty. The old vault became storage. The former loan offices became treatment rooms. We kept the marble counter in the lobby. I handled the clinical side. Celeste handled everything that allowed the clinical side to survive. I recruited therapists and physicians. She persuaded a bank to lend money to 2 black professionals with more confidence than collateral. I wrote treatment protocols. She negotiated insurance contracts. I worried about falls, infections, medication lists, and whether a patient had enough support at home. She worried about payroll, rent, referral relationships, and how long we could keep the lights on while an insurer delayed payment. Neither half was decorative. Without me, Harbor Bridge might have become a polished building with unsafe care. Without Celeste, it might have remained one good room with no money to open the next morning. That truth matters. A person can betray you after helping you build something real. The betrayal does not erase the building. The building does not excuse the betrayal. By the time our daughter Naomi was old enough to understand where we went every morning, Harbor Bridge had 3 locations. She grew up doing homework in waiting rooms and eating vending machine crackers at staff meetings. Naomi became a speech-language pathologist. She said it was because she watched her grandfather fight for words. I suspected it was also because she had spent her childhood around 2 parents who always had something to say and rarely knew how to say it to each other. When the 4th location opened, our lawyers insisted we separate the business into 2 companies. Celeste became chief executive of Harbor Bridge Recovery Management. That company controlled the brand, leases, payroll for administrative employees, marketing, equipment, and expansion. I remained president and sole owner of Booker Physical Medicine Medical Corporation. That company employed or contracted the clinicians, controlled patient records, approved clinical access, and carried final responsibility for medical decisions. Celeste called them 2 halves of one bridge. For years, that was exactly what they were. The structure was not a trick. It was not something I hid in a drawer for the day our marriage failed. Celeste signed the original agreements. Every lender saw them. Every serious buyer was supposed to understand them. The trouble began when we started treating coordination as if it were ownership. Celeste controlled the management company so completely that people began assuming she controlled everything bearing the Harbor Bridge name. I allowed that assumption because correcting it in public felt petty while we were still married. Inside the clinics, I became the man who appeared when a policy failed. A physician questioned a schedule, or a family needed an explanation no brochure could provide. Celeste became the person on magazine covers, business panels, and investor calls. I told myself visibility did not matter. That was partly maturity and partly cowardice. It was easier to say I did not need credit than to admit I disliked becoming invisible inside a system I helped create. Every Friday evening, I still printed the original staffing and safety reports. I dated them, stapled them, and signed my name across the edge of the staple. Ross Klein once held one up and asked whether I planned to store the next report on stone tablets. Paper has one advantage, I told him. It cannot pretend it was always different. Marian Ellis filed 1 copy in an off-site cabinet. She had worked with me for 20 years and knew I trusted routines more than promises. Celeste thought the reports were harmless evidence of my resistance to modern systems. She preferred dashboards. Dashboards could turn hundreds of decisions into a clean line moving in the right direction. For most of our marriage, her dashboards and my paper reports described the same company. Then, they stopped. The first sign did not look like fraud. It looked like exhaustion. Celeste had opened 2 new centers within 6 months. Clinicians were covering extra shifts. Supervisors were borrowing staff from one location to protect another. Everyone believed the strain would ease after recruitment caught up. I wanted to pause expansion. Celeste said pausing would frighten lenders and weaken confidence in the expansion plan she had already sold them. That was when our arguments stopped being about schedules and became arguments about what Harbor Bridge was for. I believed growth had to follow capacity. Celeste believed capacity would follow growth if leadership refused to blink. We separated the following spring. There was no affair, no broken lamp, no single sentence dramatic enough to explain 34 years. We began speaking through calendars, assistants, and lawyers. Naomi became the person each of us called when we wanted the other to understand something without having to say it directly. She stopped us one evening in the parking lot of the first center. "I will not carry her words to you and carry your answer back to her," she said. "You both still have voices." A week later, renovation crews removed the brass plaque from the lobby wall. Founded by Isaiah and Celeste Booker. Naomi found it beside a trash bin and placed it in the trunk of her car. She did not tell either of us. At the time, she did not know where it belonged. Neither did I. The 2 new centers opened before we had enough clinicians to staff them comfortably. Celeste called it a temporary imbalance. She had secured a $3,100,000 expansion loan and signed a personal guarantee because the lender wanted proof that she believed in the plan. She told me the risk would disappear once the sale closed. That was the first time she mentioned a buyer. Ross Klein arrived 3 weeks later. He was a rehabilitation physician with a clean suit, a quick smile, and a resume that made investors lean forward. He had helped combine 3 regional therapy groups into one national platform. He spoke about patient care the way an engineer speaks about traffic, flow, capacity, utilization, standardization. He understood medicine. He simply believed good medicine became better when every difference could become a metric, and every metric could be made to move. Celeste introduced him as Chief Integration Officer. I asked what he was integrating. She said systems, schedules, and the future. I should have asked which parts of the present he planned to erase. The first discrepancy appeared in September. A Friday report from our San Bernardino Center showed 1 uncovered physical therapy shift. A clinician had called out. No replacement had been found, and 3 patients had been moved. On Monday morning, the buyer dashboard described the same event as an administrative scheduling variance. No patient name changed. No appointment vanished. The scheduled hours were the same. Only the meaning had been softened. I asked Ross who had changed it. He said the integration team had normalized the category so investors would not confuse a temporary staffing issue with a clinical failure. I asked who authorized it. He gave me 4 minutes of language and no name. Celeste was more direct. Investors do not need every internal problem written in the most alarming vocabulary available, she said. Was the shift covered? Eventually. Were patients harmed? No. Then the dashboard is accurate. I told her accuracy was not only about whether every number survived, it was also about whether the words around those numbers told the truth. Isaiah, she said, not every disagreement is an ethical crisis. She was right about that. So I accused no one. I signed the paper report, crossed my name over the staple, and asked Marion to file it. 2 weeks later, Naomi called from our Moreno Valley Center. She was careful from the first sentence. This is about my schedule, not you and Mom. One of her speech therapists appeared on the staffing dashboard at 2 locations during the same hour. The centers were more than 30 miles apart. Naomi reported it through the regular chain. The next morning, the duplicate entry disappeared. No correction notice was issued. No supervisor called her. No incident review opened. I asked whether she had saved a copy. She had taken a screenshot because the schedule included her patients. Send it to Marion, I said. Naomi went quiet. Are you building a case against Mom? I am trying to understand a record. Those are not always different things. I told her to send it only if she believed the record was wrong, not because I was her father. 5 minutes later, Marion received it. By October, 3 clinical supervisors reported they were borrowing therapists between centers often enough to affect continuity of care. 1 occupational therapist drove from Riverside to Fontana between appointments and arrived late twice in 1 week. Celeste approved recruitment bonuses. Ross changed how travel coverage appeared on the dashboard. I requested a formal capacity review. The request remained pending. Then Marion received an email from the integration team asking her to approve a bulk export of patient information. The message called it a preliminary migration test. The request covered demographic data, insurance details, appointment history, clinical notes, and document metadata from every active patient. Marion called me before replying. Has the transition agreement been signed? She asked. No. Has the buyer been authorized to receive clinical files? No. Then this is not a test. It is a transfer without an approved destination. Marion denied the request and cited the access policy. Within 20 minutes, Ross called her. He said the export would be encrypted, limited, and handled by professionals. Marion asked him to identify the signed authorization. He told her not to hide behind paperwork. She wrote down his exact words. That afternoon, Celeste came to my office carrying 2 coffees, how she once began difficult conversations. She placed mine on the desk and said the buyer needed confidence that Harbor Bridge could move as one organization. "We are one organization," I said. "We are not one legal entity." She leaned back. "This structure was designed to protect care, not to give you a private veto over the future." "It is not private," I said. "Your signature is on it." Then she said the sale would protect every employee, settle the expansion debt, and give Harbor Bridge resources we could never build alone. I asked the price. She did not answer. I asked the closing date. She stood and straightened her sleeve. "Soon," she said. After she left, I looked at the untouched coffee. Celeste had spent our marriage believing every dangerous gap could be crossed with enough speed. For the first time, I wondered whether she had stepped onto one before checking if the other side existed. Before I hired a lawyer, I tried to disprove myself. Suspicion is easy when the person across from you is also the person ending your marriage. I knew every sharp look could become evidence if I wanted it badly enough. I knew every delay could look deliberate. I knew anger could dress itself in professional language and still remain anger. So I sent the staffing records to Helen Cho. Helen had spent years conducting rehabilitation compliance surveys before becoming an independent consultant. She had no history with Harbor Bridge and no reason to protect Celeste. I removed every name from the reports and included the duplicate schedule Naomi had saved, telling Helen only that the records conflicted. 3 days later, she called. "One altered entry can be a mistake," she said. "Several altered entries moving risk in the same direction are a pattern. Do you want comfort, Isaiah, or do you want the pattern tested?" "Testit." That answer led me to Dana Morales. Dana was a healthcare attorney who distrusted dramatic clients and admired narrow requests. She listened without interrupting while I described the changed categories, the duplicate schedule, and the export request. Then she told me what I could not do. "You cannot lock anyone out because you dislike the sale. You cannot use the medical corporation to punish your wife. You cannot remove documents you do not own. And you cannot call a difference in presentation fraud until someone qualified traces the changes. What can I do? Preserve what you are already authorized to preserve. Stop approving anything you believe is inaccurate. And hire someone who can tell us who touched the data." That someone was Priya Nanduri. Priya worked in forensic health information systems. She wore no courtroom confidence and made no promises about what she would find. She asked Marion for system maps, access rules, backup schedules, and the original reports. She asked only for patience. For 2 weeks, I heard almost nothing. Then Priya invited Dana, Marion, and me into a records room behind the first center. She had placed 3 screens on a folding table. The first showed my Friday paper report. The second showed the dashboard the buyer had seen Monday morning. The third showed the audit trail between them. 17 uncovered clinical shifts had been reclassified. 4 near-miss safety reports remained in the source system, but no longer appeared in the buyer view. No patient record had been deleted. No appointment had been invented. The truth remained. It had been arranged so a stranger would not recognize it. "Who approved the changes?" I asked. Priya enlarged a column. Every approval carried the same credential. Ross Klein. The system showed his smart card, workstation, and each approval time. Most occurred after 10 at night. I found Ross the next morning outside a treatment conference. "Did you approve 17 staffing changes?" "I approved a reporting structure." "Did your card approve the individual changes?" "My credential confirms the process, not every judgment made inside it." "Why did every judgment make the company look safer?" He studied me for a moment. "You have been looking for a reason to stop this deal since Celeste mentioned it." That was not an answer. "No," he said. "It was context." Priya kept working. Dana obtained transaction documents through the financial disclosures tied to our divorce and my minority interest in the management company. The buyer had offered $72 million. Celeste would receive cash, rollover equity, a 3-year executive contract, and a $1,200,000 bonus if the deal closed on schedule. The closing date was 3 weeks away. The purchase agreement required Harbor Bridge to disclose any material compliance investigation. It also assumed uninterrupted access to the clinicians, patient records, and clinical systems controlled by my medical corporation. One attachment stated that I had agreed in principle to remain for a 60-day transition. I had agreed to nothing. When I read that sentence, Dana stopped me before I could speak. "A false assumption is not yet proof Celeste created it," she said. "We need what she knew and when she knew it." Marion found the answer in a place none of us had expected to become important. Celeste hated long emails. For years, she had sent short voice messages labeled by topic: staffing update, lender call, board preparation. One message sent to Ross and the integration team was labeled dashboard cleanup. Her voice sounded tired, not secretive. "The buyer refreshes the data room tomorrow morning. I need the uncovered clinical hours moved out of the dashboard before then. Keep the source files intact. We are cleaning the presentation, not changing patient care." 13 minutes after the message was sent, Ross used his smart card. Priya traced the first approval to the same workstation. The recording did not say fabricate records. Celeste was too disciplined for that, and perhaps too convinced she was doing something defensible. But the timeline no longer depended on my interpretation. She had identified the risk. She had ordered it moved out of view. Ross had carried out the instruction. 2 days later, Celeste asked me to meet her at the original center. The marble counter from the old bank still stood in the lobby. She placed a folder on it and turned it toward me. The document was called a Clinical Continuity Certificate. It stated that no material staffing or safety concern threatened operations. It promised that my medical corporation would continue providing services after the sale. It named Ross as the physician who would lead the transition. All it needed was my signature. I closed the folder. "I cannot sign this." "You can," she said. "You are choosing not to. The staffing statement is not accurate. The staffing problem is temporary. Then disclose it as temporary. The buyer will delay. The bank may call the expansion loan." 2 centers could close before anyone finishes arguing about vocabulary. "How much did you guarantee?" Her face changed. $3,100,000. "And your closing bonus?" "Do not reduce this to my compensation. I am trying to understand the pressure. The pressure is 186 employees and thousands of patients who need this company to survive. Then why tell the buyer I agreed?" She looked toward the treatment hall. "Because I believed you would remember what we built before you decided to punish me for ending the marriage." I pushed the unsigned certificate back across the marble. The following morning, Dana found the draft communication plan among transaction records produced during our divorce proceedings. It had been prepared before Celeste fired me. The plan named Ross as the new clinical transition leader. It described me as a resistant founder whose objections were driven by the divorce. It instructed executives to assure the buyer that the family dispute had been contained. My public disgrace was not a reaction. It was part of the closing checklist. That was when Dana asked whether I was ready to act. "Not yet," I said. We knew why they needed me gone. We still needed to know what they planned to move the moment I was out of the way. Dana would not let me build a list of enemies. She made us build a list of actions. A name could be added only if the evidence showed one of 3 things: unauthorized access to clinical data, approval of a material change to a staffing or safety record, or preparation to transfer protected information before legal authority existed. That rule removed 2 people I distrusted and added 1 person I had defended for years. The final list held 7 names. 3 administrative executives had approved the buyer access plan. 2 integration managers had created export paths outside the normal review process. 1 compliance officer had signed a statement saying no unresolved clinical issue existed. The 7th name was Ross Klein. Celeste was not on the access list. Her chief executive account could see financial and operational reports, but it could not edit patient charts or approve changes inside the medical corporation. Dana refused to turn a narrow safety action into a symbolic attack on my wife. If she asks for new access, Dana said, it goes through legal review. Nothing more. Marion placed the 7 names inside her red downtime binder. That binder had survived power failures, a ransomware scare, 2 earthquakes, and 1 coffee spill that left the emergency contact page smelling like hazelnut for 6 years. Inside it were printed access maps, phone trees, replacement schedules, legal hold steps, and the exact sequence for removing a credential without interrupting treatment. We tested the plan on a Sunday morning. Marion disabled 7 dummy accounts, while clinic supervisors followed paper instructions. At the Fontana Center, a charge therapist discovered that 1 emergency workstation still depended on an integration manager credential. We stopped the test. No one treated the problem as an inconvenience to ignore. Priya changed the access route. Marion printed a new page. We tested it again. This time, the clinics continued without a missed chart, delayed medication review, or canceled appointment. Dana looked at me after the test. "Now you have a plan that protects patients," she said. "You still do not have permission to use it unless the risk becomes immediate." For the next 10 days, nothing happened. Celeste prepared the employee broadcast. Ross met with the buyer. Our divorce lawyers confirmed the final hearing. The management company announced a leadership update for the same morning. Then, at 11:43 on the night before the divorce, Priya called. The integration team had requested a new transfer token. If activated, it would allow the buyer system to begin copying patient metadata after the morning broadcast. Names, insurance identifiers, appointment histories, document indexes, and the locations of clinical notes would begin moving before any final transition agreement had been signed. Could it copy the notes themselves? I asked. Not yet, Priya said, but it builds the road to them. Dana joined the call. The token request established immediate risk. The public statement planned for the next morning would establish their claim that clinical control had already transferred. She authorized the legal hold and prepared the verified complaint. Marion opened the red binder on her kitchen table. At 9 the next morning, a judge ended my marriage. At 9:20, Celeste appeared beneath the Harbor Bridge logo and ended my job with the management company. She said every clinical system had been secured for a smooth transition. That sentence met the final condition Dana had written into our plan. I let Celeste finish. Then, I called Marion. Clear every name on the red list. Now, all 7, or only the data team? All 7. Continuity first. Marion did not say she was sorry. She said, understood. By then, revenge was easy. Precision was harder, slower, and far more useful to the patients depending on us. And while Celeste continued explaining why I no longer mattered, the system began recording exactly who still had the right to touch the truth. Dana filed before sunset. The complaint did not ask the court to give me my job back. It did not ask the judge to remove Celeste from the company. It did not ask for money. It asked for 4 protections. Preserve the audit logs. Stop the transfer of patient information. Prevent anyone from claiming that Ross controlled the medical corporation. And keep the clinics operating while the court decided what authority existed. The judge granted a narrow preservation order the next morning and scheduled a preliminary injunction hearing 9 days later. Those 9 days gave Celeste enough time to call my actions reckless, personal, and dangerous. They also gave Marion enough time to prove that no patient had been used as leverage. At the hearing, Dana began by conceding something important. Celeste had the authority to fire me from the management company. The termination was valid. Her attorney looked pleased until Dana placed the 2 corporate agreements before the judge. Celeste could end my administrative title, Dana said. She could not transfer a medical corporation, patient records, or professional authority through an employee announcement. The other attorney pointed to the planned transition. The judge looked over his glasses. A planned transition is not ownership, he said. Show me the signed agreement. There was none. That was the first layer. The second began with Marion. She explained how the weekly paper reports were created, signed, stored, and used during normal operations. She identified my signature crossing each staple and the cabinet where the copies had been kept. Then Priya placed 3 versions of the same information on a screen. The original staffing report, the dashboard shown to the buyer, and the audit trail between them. 17 uncovered shifts had been changed to administrative scheduling variances. 4 near-miss reports remained in the source system but disappeared from the buyer view. The judge asked whether anyone had deleted patient information. No, Priya said. The source data remained intact. What changed was what the buyer was allowed to see and how the risk was described. Dana asked one question. Did every change make Harbor Bridge appear safer? Yes. The courtroom grew quieter, not because the numbers were complicated, because they were not. The third layer belonged to Ross. Priya displayed the approval times connected to his smart card. Ross admitted that the card remained in his possession. He said he had approved a reporting framework, not every decision made by the integration staff. Dana asked whether anyone could use his credential without the card and his identification code. Ross said it was theoretically possible. Priya said the system recorded his card, his code, and the workstation inside his office. Dana played part of her voice message. The buyer refreshes the data room tomorrow morning. I need the uncovered clinical hours moved out of the dashboard before then. Keep the source files intact. We are cleaning the presentation, not changing patient care. The recording ended. Dana waited. 13 minutes later, Dr. Klein began approving the changes with his card. Ross looked toward Celeste. She did not look back. The fourth layer was not about technology. It was about pressure. Dana placed the loan guarantee, the closing schedule, and the compensation terms into the record. $3,100,000 personally guaranteed. $1,200,000 tied to an on-time closing. 21 days remaining when Celeste fired me. Her attorney stood. Financial pressure is not proof of misconduct. The judge nodded. It is not, he said. But it may explain the timing. Continue. A representative from the buyer testified. He confirmed that the buyer had been told I supported the transition, that Ross would assume clinical leadership, and that no unresolved staffing or safety matter threatened operations. Dana asked whether the buyer would have continued on the same schedule if it had known I refused to sign the continuity certificate. No. Would it have continued if it had known the dashboard hid 17 uncovered shifts and 4 near-miss reports? No. Dana handed him my written refusal. I had sent it 2 months before the planned closing. Celeste knew I had not agreed. The buyer had been told that I had. Her attorney argued that Celeste expected me to cooperate for the good of the company. That was when Dana showed the draft communication plan prepared before my termination. It described me as a resistant founder driven by divorce. It instructed executives to treat any warning from me as personal retaliation. My character had been reduced to a response script before I ever spoke. Celeste finally asked to address the court. The judge allowed it. She said Harbor Bridge employed 186 people. She said the 2 new centers could fail if the bank called the loan. She said a delayed sale might cost therapists, receptionists, drivers, and nurses their jobs. She was not lying about those risks. Then she said she had done what leaders sometimes had to do when perfect information threatened a necessary decision. I looked at the woman who had built half of Harbor Bridge. She had saved payroll more than once. She had faced lenders who underestimated her and made them listen. She had turned 1 clinic into 8. None of that was false. Neither were the records before the judge. I was asked whether stopping the sale mattered more to me than protecting the company. I said the question was backward. If the company could survive only by hiding the condition of its care, then the company was already in danger. The sale did not create that danger. It only gave people a reason not to name it. Then I looked at Celeste. If stopping the sale meant saving the truth but risking the company, which would you protect first? I had asked myself that question every night for months. Now the answer belonged to everyone listening. The judge did not decide who was a good spouse, who had built more, or whether the sale should ever happen. He ruled only on what had been proven. The medical corporation had not been transferred. Ross had not lawfully replaced me in professional authority. The patient data could not move. The audit logs had to remain preserved. The clinics could continue operating under the continuity plan while the parties and regulators reviewed the records. The court did not restore my management title. It did not remove Celeste as chief executive. It did not order the buyer to complete the purchase. It froze the claims that had made the closing possible. By the time we left the courthouse, the buyer had suspended the transaction. The bank had requested a covenant review, and the board of the management company had called an emergency meeting without either Celeste or me in the room. Celeste stood near the elevators, with Ross behind her. For the first time in our marriage, neither of us had a title that could settle the argument. She looked at me and said, "You may have saved the records and destroyed the company." I answered with the only truth I had left. If the company survives, it will have to survive what actually happened. The board placed Celeste and Ross on administrative leave that afternoon. It did not do so because I demanded it. I was not invited into the meeting. The decision came after the buyer suspended the transaction. The bank opened its covenant review, and outside counsel advised that the management company needed independent control while regulators examined the records. The 7 accounts remained closed. Marion documented every action, every restored permission, and every request for emergency access. By the end of the week, all 8 centers were still treating patients. I was appointed interim clinical custodian for 90 days. Not chief executive, not chairman, custodian. The title suited the moment better than any promotion could have. My job was to preserve care, answer investigators, and help build a structure that did not require one marriage to hold 2 companies together. Ross hired his own attorney. Celeste issued no public statement. Naomi found me at the original center 3 days later. The old marble counter was still there, polished and chipped in the same places. She waited until the lobby emptied. "I am glad you stopped the transfer," she said. Then she added, "Do not use being right about this to become right about everything." I asked what she meant. "You protected patients, Dad. You also spent years avoiding every conversation that might have forced you and Mom to admit the bridge was already cracking." I started to answer. She raised one hand. "You called silence discipline. Sometimes it was. Sometimes it was just a way to stay in control, without saying what you were afraid to lose." The words landed harder because they were not cruel. I had blamed Celeste for turning our marriage into dashboards, schedules, and negotiated positions. I had done my own version of the same thing. I had treated restraint like proof of wisdom. I had kept concerns inside my own systems, signed my paper reports, and trusted that being correct would eventually make me understood. It had not. Naomi looked toward the therapy hall. "Mom made choices she has to answer for," she said. "I am not asking you to forgive them. I am asking you not to turn this into a story where only one person failed." I told her I would try. "No," she said. "Build it so trying is not the only safeguard." That sentence became the first line in the new governance plan. Before Naomi left, she opened the trunk of her car. I saw the edge of the old brass plaque beneath a folded blanket. She noticed me looking and closed the trunk. "Not yet," she said. For once, I did not ask her to explain. I knew she was right. 4 months later, the Harbor Bridge Center smelled like paint and rubbing alcohol. Mr. Alvarez stood between 2 parallel bars while a therapist waited beside him. His left leg trembled when he shifted his weight. His wife watched from a chair near the wall, holding her purse with both hands. I still stood outside the treatment room. For most of my career, I would have stepped inside, checked the therapist position, studied the gait belt, and asked 3 questions no one needed me to ask. That morning, I stayed where I was. The therapist knew her work. The new clinical committee knew its responsibility. And the system no longer depended on me being the only person willing to notice when something was wrong. Harbor Bridge survived. The sale did not. The 2 newest centers remained open under a slower recovery plan. The management board hired an independent chief executive. Celeste resigned before the investigations ended. Ross surrendered every leadership role while his conduct review continued. I did not celebrate either outcome. Marion became Director of Privacy and Records Integrity. Her red binder became the model for a permanent continuity program. Every staffing report now required independent clinical confirmation. Every material safety concern went directly to a committee the chief executive could not overrule. My medical corporation adopted a succession plan. For the first time, I began teaching other physicians how to carry authority I had once treated as mine alone. After Mr. Alvarez completed 6 steps, Naomi entered the hallway carrying the old brass plaque. She had cleaned it, founded by Isaiah and Celeste Booker. For one moment, I thought she might hand it to me. Instead, she walked past my office and into the training room where new employees received orientation. She mounted it on the wall beside a smaller plate, built by 2 people, kept honest by everyone who serves here. Celeste had not been erased. Neither had I. But neither of us owned the meaning anymore. Naomi stepped back and studied the wall. "This never belonged in either of your offices," she said. I looked through the glass at Mr. Alvarez. He had reached the end of the bars. His wife was standing now, smiling with one hand over her mouth. My father had once taken those same uncertain steps in a place too far from home. That distance had started Harbor Bridge. Our failures had nearly ended it. What saved it was not my title, my marriage, or the plan inside the red records binder. It was the decision to place truth where no single person could move it again. My daughter did not put our marriage back together. She put the truth where it belonged.